The chamber was too quiet for comfort. The kind of silence that only falls before something seismic. Polished oak desks lined both sides, microphones already hot, blinking red, waiting to record the next American spectacle. Phones were clutched tightly in staffers' hands, screens flickering with open live streams. Reporters hovered just outside the frame, leaning in, not daring to blink. Then the door opened. Jasmine Crockett entered like a storm contained in silk. Her walk was slow, deliberate. Every step echoed like a ticking countdown. In her left hand, no legal pad, no tablet, just a single navy blue folder, but that folder was sealed. Red wax, a label in all caps stamped across the front. Confidential, Trump estate dispute. Eyes darted around the room, whispers igniting like sparks down a dry hallway. Is that real? Someone murmured behind a coffee cup. From across the aisle. Donald Trump, seated beside his legal counsel and flanked by Eric, his arms crossed. Too tightly, glanced up. The cocky smirk he wore like a badge faltered for just a moment. Jasmine didn't look at him. Not at first. She placed the folder down in front of her seat, aligned it neatly with the edge of the desk. Then finally turned to face him. Her voice was steady, cool, calculated. You might want to call your lawyer. Gasps, actual gasps. One aide dropped a pen. The chairman's gavel twitched in his hand. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's face. That split second before his mask fully slipped. The twitch in the corner of his eye. The way his lips parted, like they couldn't decide whether to smile or snarl. Livestream chat exploded. At TruthSlayer23. WTF is in that folder? At Patriot Eyes Open. Jasmine going nuclear today. #Trump inheritance began trending before she even sat down. The chair recognized her formally. But no one remembered the words that followed. All eyes in the chamber. Across Twitter, through cable news, were on the folder. Jasmine's fingers hovered above it for a beat, then drew it open, slow and surgical. Inside, a crisp letter. Handwritten old, yellowed at the edges. The name signed at the bottom was in thick black ink. Fred C. Trump. The room shifted. Reporters leaned forward as though the letter might speak on its own. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. In this letter, she began. Fred Trump acknowledges the existence of a child. A child fathered in 1953 during a private affair in Brooklyn. The name of that child, Isaiah Turner. A stunned silence overtook the room. Donald blinked, once, then again, slower. He shifted, trying to lean forward, but his attorney placed a hand gently on his sleeve. Jasmine looked directly at him for the first time. Mr. Trump, do you know Isaiah Turner? He didn't respond, his jaw locked. She slid the letter gently to the edge of the table, just within the camera's view. This document, previously sealed under the Trump Family Estate Trust, was obtained under subpoena and authenticated by 2 forensic examiners. And she reached again into the folder, this time pulling a printed email thread. This communication from Ivanka Trump shows she was aware of Isaiah Turner's claim and funded a private DNA investigation in 2012. Gasps again, from real people. Not the internet this time. Trump's expression hardened. This is a hoax, he said, voice rising just enough to ripple across the mics, but Jasmine didn't flinch. Is it? She tapped her finger once against the table, because the DNA results were conclusive. 99.9%. Probability ... Isaiah Turner is Fred Trump's son, your uncle. Or perhaps more accurately ... your half-brother. The chamber exploded. Staffers stood. Journalists rushed out to call their editors. Social media caught fire. At Justice Junkie, Trump has a black half-brother? At Liberty Torch, the legacy is unraveling in real time. At Ivanka Watch, that email thread's going to break the internet. #Crockett Files. Trump looked stunned. But more than that, cornered. This wasn't campaign rhetoric. This wasn't courtroom theater. This was bloodline, money, reputation, legacy. He looked down. Done up. Then finally whispered something. To his lawyer, Crockett's voice cut through the murmurs like a razor. This folder is just the beginning. She slid it closed with one deliberate motion. Then. Silence again. Heavy, weighted, electrified. Outside, the steps of the Capitol were filling. News vans, protesters, curious bystanders drawn by the pulse of history reshaping in real time. And Jasmine, she just folded her hands and waited for the next tremor to hit, because she knew what was coming next. And Trump had no idea. What she had left to unseal, asked ChatGPT. The chamber hadn't moved. The cameras were still rolling, but no one knew what to say. Even the judge leaned back ever so slightly, lips pursed, watching Jasmine Crockett. With the caution one reserves for a fuse that's just been lit, she didn't raise her voice. Instead, she flipped open a second document, an aged court filing, stamped in fading ink. Turner v. Trump Estate. Motion to establish paternity. 1987. Most of you have never seen this case, she said, her tone deliberate, slicing the silence into tension, because it never went to trial. She held it up just enough for the cameras to capture. The document was worn, dog-eared, yellowed, but the plaintiff's name was unmistakable. Isaiah Turner. Murmurs broke out. Trump leaned forward slightly, brow furrowed. Eric whispered to the family's counsel, who gave a stiff shake of the head, either unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the document's existence. This was buried by a legal team under Donald Trump's direction. The plaintiff was a decorated Korean War veteran, African-American, lived in Crown Heights. He filed this motion after obtaining personal correspondence from Fred C. Trump, claiming that he was his biological father. Crockett let that sit, not just in the air, but in history. She unfolded the next sheet. A single page, handwritten. Her fingers gripped the top edge with reverence and purpose. This letter, she said slowly, was written in 1955, 2 years after Isaiah Turner's birth. It was discovered by Turner's daughter in a locked safe following his death in 2003. The camera zoomed in. My dear Ruth, it began. You asked me to acknowledge the child. You know I cannot. Not in public. But I promise the boy will be taken care of quietly. I owe you that much. Frida gasp escaped from the audience gallery. It was small, involuntary, the kind of human reaction even decorum couldn't suppress. Trump shifted again, visibly uncomfortable now. His hands were balled into fists on the table. His lawyer's fingers typed frantically on a tablet. This letter was authenticated by 2 independent forensic experts. The ink, the stationery, all traced to Fred Trump's office materials from the 1950s. Crockett continued, and she added with surgical precision. A partial trust fund was established for a JIT under a shell entity tied to the Trump Organization. That entity made annual payments to a Crown Heights address until 1989, the same year. Turner's lawsuit was dismissed without explanation. Someone gasped again. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room, but it was already descending into chaos. The implications were setting in. This wasn't just some family squabble. This was generational fraud, a legacy built on a lie. Scrubbed clean for political convenience, Trump stared at the letter, or perhaps through it. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Crockett closed the file slowly. Like placing the lid on a sarcophagus, she looked at the judge. Respectfully, Your Honor, we move to a reopened discovery on the Turner case. Silence again, but this time, it wasn't shock. It was anticipation, because the ghost of Fred Trump had just been called to testify, and his secrets were no longer silent for most of the hearing. Donald Trump had done what he did best, performed. Arms crossed, eyebrows raised, lips curled in a half-smirk that reeked of dismissal. He glanced around the chamber like it was a poorly directed reality show. To the cameras, it read as confidence. To the room, it read as control, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't. Done. Not even close. She lifted a new folder, this one thick, marked Exhibits B through E. No dramatic pause this time. Just the swift, mechanical unraveling of evidence like a surgeon laying out her tools. Let the record show, she began, that these materials were obtained via subpoena from 2 separate private investigative firms, both hired discreetly by Ivanka Trump in 2012. Trump's expression didn't falter yet, but his eyes flicked once, just once, toward Ivanka, seated 2 rows back. Her face was blank, not defensive. Not confused? Just unreadable, Crockett continued. The first is a photograph. taken in 1979 outside a Crown Heights duplex. It shows Fred Trump handing a large envelope to a woman identified as Ruth Turner. The boy beside her, Isaiah Turner, age 26, already a war veteran. Already erased. She turned the photo toward the judge, then held it toward the cameras. The resemblance was undeniable. The jawline, the heavy brow, the unmistakable Trump scowl, only softened by years of silence. Trump shifted. One hand reached for a glass of water that he didn't drink. The other gripped the edge of the table. Knuckles whitening, Crockett went on. The second document is a bank transfer from 1986, a $50,000 deposit into an account belonging to J. Isaiah T. The routing traces back to a Trump organization. Shell Corporation named Hilvern Holdings. Trump leaned toward his attorney now, lips moving behind the mic's range. The attorney only nodded slowly, already sweating. The smirk was gone. The poker face? Cracked. Not shattered, but visibly. Strained. And then came the kill shot, a printed document, crisp, cold, clinical. Exhibit E, Crockett said, is a DNA report. Ordered by Ms. Ivanka Trump on January 8, 2012. The samples were collected through a private intermediary, and the report was issued by Genetica Forensics under sealed confidentiality. She walked to the judge's bench, handed over the document, then turned, eyes locking with Trump's. The result reads, 99.92% probability of shared paternal DNA between Isaiah Turner and Donald J. Trump. The room did not explode, it imploded. A vacuum of disbelief, tension, and rapidly rising heat. Trump inhaled, jaw clenching. His hand twitched at the mic, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Outside, Twitter detonated. Breaking justice. Ivanka tested the DNA. It's real. Trump brother MAG in denial. Say it ain't so. Jasmine unsealed. Fred Trump's empire just cracked from the inside. Inside the courtroom. Crockett simply sat back down. No gloat. No grin. She didn't need to break. Trump's poker face. She had made him fold. The air in the chamber was already thin when Jasmine Crockett reached for her next card, but this one hit differently. She didn't introduce it with legal jargon. She didn't even stand. She just adjusted the microphone ever so slightly and said, "Let the record reflect." This email was sent from ivanka.trump@private.tzmail.com on May 12, 2012. She cleared her throat once, and then began to read. "I've spoken with Mother. We agree this cannot go public. But I want answers. If there's even a chance he's blood, we need to know, for the trust, for the future. I've wired the retainer to Genetica. Discretion is not optional." Gasps rippled across the benches. Eric shot a wide-eyed look toward the back row. Ivanka didn't flinch. Donald blinked rapidly, his composure fraying, unraveling with each syllable. He leaned into his lawyer, hissing something, but the mic caught only static. Crockett looked up from the printout. No further explanation. No denial of Turner's identity, just quiet maneuvering. A daughter preparing for war. She held the printed email toward the judge, then turned it to the press cameras. This is not the act of a curious child. This is the act of an heir, protecting her slice of $1 billion pie. A firestorm began to build on the outside, but inside the judge looked stunned. Even he couldn't hide it now. He tapped the gavel once, trying to contain a room that was growing more unstable by the second. A low voice from the Republican bench tried to object. "Irrelevant, Your Honor," but it fell flat. The silence that followed was damning. And then the gavel came down. Recess, 30 minutes. The room shattered into noise. Reporters darted to their phones. Camera crews scrambled to secure outside positions. Attorneys huddled like shaken chess pieces. Crockett stood slowly, placed the email printout into her binder, and turned without a word. But outside, that's where it detonated. As the heavy double doors opened onto the Capitol steps, a crush of reporters surged like a wave. All cameras turned to one woman, Ivanka Trump. She exited behind her father, her face neutral, expression glassy. But the press didn't care. "Miss Trump, did you fund the DNA test? Is Isaiah Turner your uncle? Did you tell Donald? Is this about inheritance? Ivanka didn't speak, not a word. She lowered her gaze for a moment, reached for her sunglasses, and that motion, that tiny hesitation, said everything. The silence was louder than a confession, and in that pause, camera shutters snapped like gunfire. Inside, Trump remained behind, hunched over documents, jaw working furiously. Crockett, meanwhile, returned to her desk with a calmness that only comes from knowing the storm had already landed. She didn't need to chase Ivanka. Outside, she'd already buried her inside, and America was watching every frame. The courtroom dimmed slightly as the projector screen lowered behind the judge's bench. The bailiff announced the remote witness with the solemnity of a funeral. Calling to testify, Miss Eleanor Briggs, former housekeeper for the Trump family, 1949 to 1960. The screen flickered, then settled on the fragile face of a woman in her 90s, skin thin as tissue, eyes heavy with time. Her voice trembled, but the weight of what she carried made the room lean forward in unified silence. "Can you hear me, dear?" she asked gently, eyes blinking toward the camera. Jasmine Crockett stood. "We hear you, Miss Briggs, loud and clear." Eleanor adjusted her glasses with shaking fingers. "I worked in the Queen's residence. Fred and Mary Trump, I cleaned his study every Wednesday. I knew where he kept his checkbooks. And I knew when he'd disappear." Trump sat straighter in his chair. His hands were folded tightly now, pale against the dark desk. He didn't interrupt. He didn't blink. Eleanor continued. "In 1953, Mr. Trump began visiting Brooklyn once a week, always Thursday nights. Said he had business meetings. But one night, he forgot his overcoat. I had just cleaned the pockets. Inside, I found an envelope." Crockett leaned in. "What was in the envelope, Miss Briggs?" "A lease agreement for an apartment, Crown Heights, under the name Richard Frederickson." Murmurs rolled through the chamber. The alias was familiar, a name long rumored to have been Fred Trump's shell identity. But I didn't think much of it until one night. Mr. Trump came home at 2 a.m., mud on his shoes, a letter in his hand. I asked if everything was all right, and he told me. Her voice wavered. "The boy's born. Spitting image of me, that's what he said." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. Crockett didn't speak. She let the words settle like ash. Eleanor's voice was steady now, as if she had waited decades for this moment. Later that year, I was told not to enter the study without knocking. I'd find cash missing from the safe, always after Thursday. I never asked, not directly, but once I saw him at the front door with a large envelope. Side, he was delivering a scholarship to a family friend. Her lips tightened. He didn't lie well. Never did. The silence inside the courtroom was thunderous. Then Eleanor added the words that pierced the floorboards. 3 years later, I was asked to burn a stack of photos. But one slipped behind the cabinet. I still remember it. A black woman holding a boy, same eyebrows, same chin, same eyes as Donald. She looked straight into the camera. I saw that child. He looked just like Donald. Even the conservative reporters at the back of the chamber stopped typing. Crockett walked slowly to the screen. "Miss Briggs, why are you coming forward now?" "Because I've asked God every night if silence made me complicit." On 92. I don't want a meeting with that weight still on me. Outside, cable news host blinked in disbelief. On Fox, a commentator whispered, This is not a political hit job. This feels like history catching up." Inside, Trump didn't move, for once. The silence belonged to him. Ask ChatGPT. It wasn't the thickest file Jasmine Crockett had brought. In fact, it was barely more than a stapled packet of 6 pages, but the words on the cover, in bold, red-inked letters, were enough to still the air. "Do not disclose, Turner claim contingency planning, 2014. She placed it on the evidence display stand with the deliberate motion of someone lowering a match toward gasoline. "The following," Crockett said, her voice calm but cutting, "is an internal memorandum prepared by Trump Organization. General Counsel Alan Kaufman in late 2014, less than 2 years before Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign. Trump's legal team shifted visibly. One attorney whispered into another's ear, then quickly stood. Objection. Your Honor, this document was never sanctioned by executive leadership. It's unofficial. The judge raised a hand. Well, allow it for review. The courtroom screen lit up. Page 1 of the memo appeared in stark clarity. Given renewed inquiries from the Turner estate and increased media risk due to preliminary campaign considerations, the following steps must be enacted to neutralize exposure. Gasps. Crockett didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her finger hovered just above the screen as she read. 1. Cease all direct financial transfers and reroute remaining disbursements via Hilvern Holdings. 2. Renew NDA contracts with surviving Turner relatives with adjusted hush clause timelines. 3. Destroy physical letters held in Queen's Archive vault referencing Fred C. Trump's paternal responsibility. The courtroom exploded into murmurs. The judge called for order. Trump's lead counsel stood again, this time louder. This memo is unauthorized. A rogue document from a disgruntled employee. It holds no legal merit. Crockett raised a single eyebrow and turned to the gallery. Then, I assume you won't mind if we call Mr. Kaufman for deposition? Trump's face darkened. For a man who prided himself on controlling the board, this was a move he hadn't seen coming outside the courtroom. The leak had already hit the networks. Screens on every journalist's phone lit up simultaneously. Breaking. Internal Trump memo confirms Turner suppression plan. Hashtag cover-up memo began trending on X within seconds. Cable news tickers rolled. Do not disclose. Memo surfaces in Trump inheritance hearing. Back inside. Trump's team began drafting denials before Crockett even closed her folder, but the damage was already done, because in the court of public opinion, the memo wasn't a document. It was a confession. The gavel slammed down with finality. Recess for 30 minutes. The courtroom erupted into a controlled frenzy. Whispers, footsteps, phones raised high. The air thick with tension. Eric Trump stormed out of the defendant's bench like a man pushed too far. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with fury. His usual composed mask was shattered. He caught sight of Jasmine Crockett near the exit and wasted no time. This is a circus, Eric spat, voice raised but carefully modulated to carry in the hall. You're putting on a show, a political spectacle with no regard for truth? Or decency? Crockett turned slowly, her posture relaxed but every inch radiating steel. No hint of intimidation. Just unshakable calm. This isn't theater, Mr. Trump, she said quietly, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the noise. This is your father's legacy unraveling piece by piece. And I'm just here to hold it to the light. Eric's nostrils flared. You think smearing my family is justice? You're exploiting secrets, stirring division to advance your career? Justice isn't about careers, Crockett replied, eyes locked on his. It's about truth, accountability. The millions who've been silenced, hidden behind that facade. The hallway fell momentarily silent except for the hum of distant cameras and murmurs from courthouse staff. Eric stepped closer, lowering his voice, but the tension only escalated. You're not a lawyer, Jasmine. You're a showrunner. And, this isn't justice, it's a spectacle for clicks and headlines. She smiled then, slow and knowing. Then call it what you want. Because when this is over, the truth will be all anyone remembers. And you'll be remembered as the man who tried to bury it? The exchange had been caught on multiple smartphones. In minutes, videos exploded across social media. Clips from the heated confrontation flooded every feed: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, each with millions of views. Within the hour, the hashtag legacy unraveled was trending globally. The hashtag bore Crockett's name and face. The calm authority in a maelstrom of outrage and revelation, media outlets dissected the moment, a flashpoint between political entitlement and the rising tide of accountability. Commentators praised Crockett's poised defiance. Pundits debated the implications for the Trump family brand. Behind the scenes, legal teams scrambled to shift narratives. But the damage was clear. Jasmine Crockett had cemented herself as more than just an attorney or congresswoman. She was the public's emblem of unflinching courage, standing tall amid chaos, giving voice to a reckoning long overdue. As the recess timer ticked down, The courtroom emptied, yet the echoes of that hallway confrontation lingered like wildfire. The real trial was no longer confined to the room. It was raging on screens. In conversations across the country. And Crockett stood at its center. Unyielding, the legacy was unraveling, and no amount of spin could stitch it back together. The court proceedings hummed with mounting tension. But behind the scenes, an unexpected presence was quietly making itself known. Security footage flickered onto the big screen behind. The judge's bench, grainy, almost mundane. Yet the camera's fixed eye captured a moment the room wasn't prepared for. There, standing just beyond the courthouse corridor, was an elderly black man. His posture was upright, his eyes steady despite the crowd. The security camera zoomed in as he adjusted the sleeve of his worn blazer. The timestamp read, "Today 9:37 a.m." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. The judge glanced at Crockett. Eyebrows raised, with a subtle nod, Jasmine rose and addressed the court. "Your Honor, I would like to formally recognize Mr. Isaiah Turner, the man at the center of this inheritance dispute, who has quietly observed these proceedings from the hallway." All eyes shifted. Trump's head jerked toward the screen. His lips parted slightly, frozen mid-expression. Isaiah's hand slipped from his coat pocket. Revealing a vintage signet ring, the camera zoomed in, an intricately carved crest, unmistakably matching the insignia worn by Fred Trump. During his college years, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Trump's gaze locked on the ring. His face was unreadable, but his fingers trembled ever so slightly. Isaiah's eyes met Crockett's across the courtroom. A brief nod exchanged, a silent acknowledgement heavy with history and pain. For the first time, the dispute became palpably personal. Reporters leaned forward, sensing the weight of this quiet moment. The man wasn't just a name or a document. He was flesh, blood, and a living testament to buried truths. Outside, social media lit up. Clips of the security footage went viral within minutes. Truth seeker, the man has arrived. Hashtag Isaiah Turner legacy unveiled. The silent witness, Crockett power. This is the moment history changed. Back inside the courtroom, Trump sat rigid, staring at the screen, unable to break his frozen stare. The stranger in the hallway was no longer a ghost of the past. He was very much alive and watching, and the legacy Trump had fought so hard to control was slipping through his fingers. The room was electric. Every eye glued to the judge's bench as Jasmine Crockett rose once more. Her binder thick with evidence, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "Your Honor," Crockett began, her voice calm but resolute. "In light of recent revelations and the overwhelming public interest, we respectfully move to subpoena the complete inheritance trust documents of Donald J. Trump and related entities." Trump's legal team shifted uneasily, exchanging quick, anxious glances. The lead attorney rose to object, voice urgent but strained. "Your Honor, these documents are protected under long-standing confidentiality agreements and sealed by court order. Their disclosure risks irreparable harm to our client and the Trump organization." Judge Reinhold adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the crowded courtroom. He tapped his gavel lightly. "This court acknowledges the gravity of the request and the arguments presented. However, the unprecedented public interest and the serious questions surrounding the Turner claim warrant a limited unsealing of trust documents." A murmur spread. Reporters scribbled frantically. Phones were raised to capture every moment. "Therefore," the judge continued, "the court orders a partial unsealing, specifically those documents containing any mention of beneficiaries or claims referencing IT or any variations thereof." The courtroom gasped collectively. Trump's face went pale. His fingers clenched the edge of the table. Knuckles white, Crockett nodded solemnly and gestured to the clerk. Minutes later, a sealed box, freshly delivered from a federal records vault, was carried in and placed carefully on the evidence table. The clerk opened it. Pulling out a stack of thick manila folders, Crockett flipped to the first marked Beneficiaries, Confidential. Her voice echoed as she began reading aloud. "It is hereby declared that Isaiah Turner, designated as Beneficiary Code IT, shall receive 15% of the estate assets, managed under Hilvern Holdings, effective immediately upon Fred C. Trump's death. Single quotes, whispers erupted. The Trump defense team scrambled to object, but the judge held up a hand. This is part of the evidence now in the public record. Reinhold declared firmly. Crockett turned to the cameras. This document confirms the existence of a previously undisclosed beneficiary, Isaiah Turner, officially recognized and written into the Trump Inheritance Trust decades ago. She looked directly at Donald Trump. This is no longer speculation. This is fact. The air was thick with disbelief and tension. Behind her, the courtroom screens flickered with close-ups of signatures, dates, and legal stamps, each one marking a nail in the coffin of secrecy. Outside, the livestream chat exploded. Inherit truth. It's official. Hashtag Isaiah Turner is a Trump heir. Truth Watch. The trust can't lie. Legal Eagle. History just got rewritten. Trump sat frozen. The reality sinking in. The legal trap Crockett had set with precision had just snapped shut, and there was no turning back. The courtroom had never felt this tense. Donald Trump stood, towering but visibly shaken. His tie was loosened. The confidence that once oozed from every gesture now seemed like a fading echo. Cameras zoomed in, networks broadcasting the moment in real time. The world was watching. He raised a trembling hand and spoke directly to the judge. Your Honor, what you've seen today, it's all fake, fabricated, dug up by political enemies desperate to tarnish my name. That document? He pointed to the trust files on the table. It's forged. Isaiah Turner is a hoax. Gasps, but Crockett didn't flinch. She remained seated, calm, waiting. Then, with the elegance of a performer at the height of her power, she slowly stood and lifted her final folder. Your Honor, the defense has tried to reframe truth as fiction, but this is reality caught on camera. Permission to submit into evidence a recorded deposition, dated November 2020, from Mr. Alan Brofsky, Fred Trump's personal legal counsel and confidant from 1951 to 1987. The judge nodded. Granted. The lights dimmed slightly. All eyes turned to the courtroom monitors. A grainy video flickered to life. An elderly man, eyes sunken but voice steady, sat in a dated office surrounded by Trump family memorabilia. Brofsky leaned forward. Yes, I was instructed by Fred C. Trump to create what we internally called the Turner contingency. It was a hush fund. We used it to pay off the mother, quietly, monthly stipends. The child, Isaiah, he looked just like young Donald. Fred insisted it remain buried. He didn't trust his wife to know. He didn't trust the media. But he wanted the boy taken care of out of guilt or fear. I'll never know. The room fell silent, not a sound. Not even the clicking of reporters' keyboards. Trump's mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no words came. His eyes flicked toward the exit doors, like a man searching for a way out of a sinking ship. Judge Reinhold's gavel struck like thunder. Judge Reinhold's gavel struck like thunder. This deposition corroborates the Inheritance Trust documents, the witness testimony, and establishes a long-standing pattern of concealment. The court finds no merit in the claim of fabrication. The livestream erupted. Democracy No. Historic. Trump exposed. Hashtag Turner Air. Joe P. Insider. Trump's final defense just imploded. Court watch live. This is bigger than Nixon. Crockett gave a small nod. No smile, no celebration. She simply closed her binder, the one that had contained months of buried truths, and stepped back. No words were needed. The silence in her wake was louder than any gavel outside the courthouse. Crowds were already gathering. Inside, history had just been written, and Donald Trump, for the first time in the entire trial, looked like a man who understood he had lost.